So I sent a couple notifications. Thank you guys for joining. So I'm just going to reiterate, my name is Jocelyn Hurtado. I am the archivist at the Black Archives, and this is part of our Safe for Your Home series, where we develop a couple series to keep you guys entertained at home and educated about what's going on, some of the events in historical events in Black South Florida. And my series is called Is It True? Tales from the Magic City. This is where I dive into a couple of legends, a couple myths, a couple stories heard over the years about Black Miami and see if there's any basis to it at all. So today's segment is it true that Nathaniel Adams Coles played in the Magic City's historic Black high school, Booker T. Washington? So before I start, I give you the name Nathaniel Adams Coles, but does anybody know what is the artist name, the stage name for this person? I'll give you a hint. It's somewhere in the background, my background. Can anybody take a guess? Let's see. So, my question is, who is Nathaniel Adams Coles? Cole, what was his stage name? Okay, so his stage name, yes, Rhea, you got it right. It's Nat King Cole. So his Javelin, you put made King Cole. No, it's Nat King Cole. So Nathaniel King Cole actually came to the Magic City in the summer of 1953, and he played with a couple of students from Booker T. Washington. And for those of you who don't know, Booker T. Washington is the oldest high school for Black students in Miami-Dade. Back in the day, because of Jim Crow law and segregation, children of color could not go to the white school. And it wasn't until Booker T. Washington High School was opened up that children of color can go to high school here in Miami. If they wanted to pursue higher education, further education, they would have to go all the way to Tallahassee to Florida A&M, FAMU. And let me just give you a brief history about Booker T. Washington High School. I wanted to just show you a couple of things. A couple of months ago, I actually did a Brown Bag Lunch series on Booker T. Washington. And the Brown Bag Lunch series is a at-location program that we developed at the Black Archives, where it was free and open to the public. Currently, we're not doing it because of the current situation, but I covered Booker T. Washington High School, and I just want to give you a brief recap of the school. Okay, so just give me 1 second. Okay. So Booker T. Washington High School opened up October 19 of 1927, and it was actually 1926, and it was actually scheduled to be open a little bit earlier because due to a couple construction issues, it wasn't open. And I actually found a newspaper article talking about the designation of Booker T. Washington High School, the allotted land. There is a newspaper article that I found stating that the city designated, give me 1 second, it designated $65,000 for the construction of the colored school. And let me just give you this newspaper article so you can see. Give me 1 second. And it was published July 31st, 1924. And this is a Miami Herald article. Give me 1 second. Let me just flip over really quick. All right. So as you can see, the title of this newspaper article is titled $200,000 Bond Issue Sought for Schools. And the two schools that were mentioned were Coral Gables High School, and which is the white school, and they got allotted $35,000. And then Booker T. Washington High School, which got allotted $65,000. It was $30,000 for the purchase of the school and $10,000 for the repairs of school buildings. So that is a newspaper article. And when the school opened in 1926, the class size was not that big. Give me 1 second. And so, if you can see here, this is actually from the 1930 Booker T. Washington yearbook called the Bawashi. At the Black Archives, we actually house two 1930s. We have two copies of the 1930s yearbook. And the reason I'm giving you a little bit of back history on the school, because it just plays such an important role, and the school really keyed into the development of the children's music, home ec, different talents, and the community was really involved into giving different opportunities to the children. And one of those opportunities was to actually meet some of, at that moment, at times, biggest performers, which I'm going to get into a little bit later. So if you can read here, on the 18th day of October, the year 1926, we, the present senior class, enter upon 4 years tour of the academic world. The trip has hold many joys and pleasure, mingled with disappointments, but we're young and courageous. And it basically talked about what the senior class, what they've been through. When they first started off, the class size was actually bigger. Let's see, the class size was, the class size says here, let me just zoom in. All right, okay, that's a little bit better. So the class size was actually bigger, but a lot of students dropped off over the year just because they needed to go in the work field to help out their parents. And some of them actually dropped off because they deemed it too hard or because they moved away. And we actually have the names of some of the students. And now I'm just gonna flip over. The reason I really like this collection is because it gives us an insight. What was school like in 1930? And in the cover, this is a cover of the yearbook, and this is what it looks like. And then inside the yearbook, you see who it belonged to. It says, "To Christine Jones, from your sweetheart, Robert H. Jackson, Sunday, July 6, 1930. Isn't that amazing? Like, you have the actual handwriting of the person who owned this book, who it was given to, the date and everything. And then on the inside, you actually have a doodle. You know, something that we do nowadays when we are like bored or in class. We start doodling inside, and somebody actually doodled a car and a baseball diamond. All right. And just to give you a little bit more context, I want to show you a couple of pictures of the school, some of the students. Give me 1 second. So these were the sophomores. These were some of the freshmen, incoming classes. Look how they were dressed. All right. And then I'm going to just flip it around. I also want to talk to you about, the reason of the segments, which is Nat King Cole and his visit to Booker T. Washington High School. So we are going to start off here. So in February 27th, 1953, according to the Miami News, Nat King Cole actually stayed in Miami for 2 weeks and was visiting the students. And in the studios of WIOD, he was actually part of this program called the Youth Roundup Speaks. And he was there playing the piano with a local boy from Booker T. Washington High School called Bobby Kendricks. And at that time, Nat King Cole also had a tenure stay at Cyril's nightclub, which was located in Alton, Miami Beach. And let me just read you this. Nat, who has played the piano since early age of 4, always wanted to be a jazz musician. He formed his Nat King Cole trio and was quite successful in the jazz field. When he discovered he could sing, everyone was familiar with his recording, Mona Lisa, Somewhere Along the Way, Too Young, and too many more. And it says, so this in particular, is Nat King Cole playing with Bobby Kendricks. And at the Black Archives, we actually have an original picture of this moment where you have Nat King Cole teaching Bobby Kendricks the piano. And Bobby Kendricks idolized Nat King Cole. I'm just going to flip it over. All right. Thank you guys for bearing with me. I know sometimes the camera is moving a lot. It can be a little bit disoriented, but I actually found a couple more articles regarding his visit, and I want to get to it. So if you see me looking away, is that I'm looking to pull up the articles. I want to pull up the right one. All of this information is I gather by looking at the newspaper database, and it's directly coming. It's a primary source document. So give me 1 second. I am going to pull it up. And in the meantime, I want to know, what is your favorite Nat King Cole song? Mine's is Smile. Does anybody have a favorite Nat King Cole song? Oh, sorry. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna flip you guys over, and I'm gonna show you this news article. So, all right, we got an answer. So, for Mr. Barber, the executive director, his favorite Nat King Cole song is "Unforgettable." Oh, the Christmas song. I love his Christmas song. And did you know that Nat King Cole actually produced 3 fully Spanish records? And let me just flip it over so you guys can see my face. And his first Spanish album he recorded in Cuba in 1958. And at the time, he wanted to stay at one of the most prestigious hotel there in Cuba, but because of his race and his color, they did not allow him. However, when he returned a couple years later, he was allowed to stay there. That's just a little fun facts. He produced 3 fully Spanish albums, and let's get back to this. Okay, so this news article is from his stay in Overtown in his time at Booker T. Washington High School in February 20th, 1953. This was reported in the Miami News. It says, King Cole Wheeler on radio show. So it talks about his records, it talks about his appearance on the show, and it also talks about some of the acts that were with him at that time. And it says, for the last 2 weeks, no one in the studio audience has guessed the mystery tune, played by staff organist Clark Ferris, when Key-Zero game is played. This makes the total which can be won is $30 in gift certificate. It says, and it also talks about Nat King Cole, the talented Nat King Cole, and the talented kid Bobby Kendrick, who was in the 9th grade at that time. And it talks about how he was part of the youth roundup, and how some other kids also around the counties were selected, and they were going to appear in the radio show on WIOD. All right. And the youth roundup, it was transcribed every Saturday at 2:30 p.m. and air Monday nights between 6:15 and 6:45. Give me 1 second. I want to show you this. Give me 1 second. No, sorry. But this is a picture of him. Give me 1 second. A couple of photos. Just gonna scroll through it. All right, so I'm gonna flip the camera around so you guys can look at me, so I won't be rude. But yeah, so Nat King Cole actually stayed in Overtown in the mid-1950s. He went to Booker T. Washington High School and was around the area for 2 weeks. And he especially, there was a mentorship between him and Bobby Kendricks. And I actually found information on Bobby Kendricks in his later years. He unfortunately died at a young age, but he was known for his love of piano, his idolization of Nat King Cole, and the fact that he also had a golden voice like his favorite musician. And I am going to pull this up. So in the meantime, I want to ask you guys, have you guys ever heard that Nat King Cole was in Overtown or in Booker T. Washington High School? He was not the only musician that visited the school. It was actually kind of a thing that a lot of famous musicians like Lena Horne, other famous musicians actually went to Booker T. Washington High School, and it was a thing that they would perform in the school's auditorium for the children and for the community. And it was as a lot of you might know, because I know some of my other colleagues, we discussed this before, because of Jim Crow law, when a lot of the musicians, when they came to Miami to perform, they would perform in Miami Beach, which was the white section, but they were not allowed to stay there. And after they would perform, they would actually come over to town, and that's how actually Color Town got the name Overtown. And they would actually stay in Overtown, and that's where they would say the real performance began. That's where the real party was. In Overtown, they would go to the local nightclubs such as the Harlem Square Club, the Rockland Palace, the Night Beat, and they would go over to Overtown and they would perform for their community and actually fully enjoy themselves. So if you give me 1 second, I'm going to pull up a couple articles. But yes, how many of you guys knew that's how Overtown got the name? It's not, a lot of people who are not from Miami, even a lot of Miami natives, don't know how the name Overtown was derived, but it was basically derived because when a lot of the residents of Color Town would go to Miami Beach or other areas, when they were coming back home, they would say, I'm going to go over to town. So I thought that was really interesting because I was a Miami native, and before starting working at the Black Archive, I did not know the history behind the name. Okay. How? I'm sorry, Mr. Barry, can you please elaborate how? I do not know what you mean by that. Okay, so I found the article I was looking for. Sorry, I have so many articles and it kind of got lost. Okay, so this is the article I was looking for. It's called, it's from February 19, 1953. It says, "You are all invited to the Youth Roundup Speaks radio show, WIOD, at 2:30. Nat King Cole, now playing as Cyril, and movie star Burt Wheeler will be guest stars, and you'll see the Roundup Nat King Cole 2, 14-year-old Bob in person, of the 14-year-old Bobby Kendricks of Booker T. Washington High School. I remember years back playing the same bill with Burt Wheeler at the Earl Theater in Philadelphia. It was one of the high spots of my so-called career." All right. I don't know if I lost you guys there because I know the connection was bad, but I hope you guys were able to see that, and I'm just going to leave it here for a couple more minutes so you guys can read this. Okay. Now, give me 1 second. I'm just going to pull this up. Okay, the if this is something different. But yes. And I'm going to show you a couple more images of Booker T. Washington that we have at the Block Archives. This is the home economic image that we have in our education collection Booker T. Washington folder. This is a typewriting class. And this was from the parades. I believe this is from the Orange Blossom Parade, but these were students from Booker T. Washington High School. And then we also have at the Black Archives, we actually have original issues of Booker T. Washington's newspaper called the Washingtonian. And let me show you, yeah, it's over here. And it talks about the graduating class of 1929. Some of the individuals, for example, there is Dorothy Johnson McKellar. Does anybody know who Dorothy Johnson McKellar is? She is related to somebody who's really a big pioneer in Miami's Black community. If anybody wants to chime in, does anybody know who Dorothy Johnson McKellar is? We also have Arthurine Collier and Sarah Alexander, and some of the other students are Jerome Jameson, Samuel O. Tanner, Cohen Elliott J. Piaz, Eugene Duncombe, J. Kenneth Johnson. Second. Yes, Ms. Brayden, I knew you would get that. Dorothy Johnson McKellar was Dr. Field's mom, and she was part of the graduating class of Booker T. Washington in 1929. It was the second graduating class, and at the Black Archives, we have the Washingtonian from 1950, I believe this is 1954. All right, and then also you actually have her uncle, who is J.K. Johnson, and this is her uncle. Okay. So I'm going to flip over the camera really quick. All right. So at this time, I would like just to ask if anybody has any questions. I'm looking for an article, and I kind of got lost in the shuffle, but I'm going to see if I find it. But in the meantime, does anybody have any questions about Booker T. Washington visiting, Nat King Cole visiting Booker T. Washington in the 1950s? Okay. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is the article that I found on, sorry about that. This is the article that I found on Bobby Kendricks. So this is announcing his death. This is announcing his death, and it talks about how people remembered him. He was known as Mr. Music, and he was always full of music and laughter, and it was born at a time when it was tough for blacks in the art. But he grew up in Overtown. He had foresight and looked beyond barricades strewn in his path. In a lifetime, his audience included the late President John F. Kennedy, and he went to Phyllis Wheatley Elementary. He was remembered for wearing shorts, pants, and starched pale color shirts. And back in the day, he was actually chided on by his fellow teammates for not being a football star and much rather prefer to go be out singing. But he was known as for having a golden voice. And it talks about when he met his idol also as well, and it also talks about just his time with the community and how his fellow classmate remember him. And it was written, this article was actually written by B.L. Hines, who is a well-known columnist, and he at the Black Archives we actually have a lot of columns from Miss B. Hines. And yes. Okay. So that is my session for today. So my session for today was just talking about Nat King Cole and his time at Booker T. Washington High School. He was there in 1953. He was here for 2 weeks, and at the time he performed at Zero's nightclub in Alton Road in Miami Beach. And at the time he spent a time with Bobby Kendricks, who was a young kid from Overtown who idolized Nat King Cole, and he was later to be known as a Mr. Music as well, with a golden voice. And thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a great day. Remember to tune in tomorrow for Today in Black History with Alicia Melton. Wednesday is Jeopardy Noir with the Executive Director Timothy Barber. Thursday is Profile on Greatness with Louis Berthin. Friday is going to be a field trip or a special edition of Jeopardy Noir. And Saturday is story time, and I believe we're going to have a story time in color. But if you want to keep posted on the latest date, please make sure to follow us on our social media here at About South Floor, and in our Black Archives page in our Facebook. And just to let you know, on July 15th, we are going to have an event. It's called More Than Just a Hashtag. It's a Zoom panel discussion where we're going to be talking about some of the current events that are happening. And if you follow us on our Facebook page, we are going to see our latest information of how you're going to sign up. Latest information who's going to be part of the panel, so make sure to follow. And if you have any questions, please feel free to submit. Have a good day.